Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm honored to talk to New York Times bestselling author J.A. Jance about The Girl from Devil's Lake. So before I get into this book, may I share a little story with you?
Of course.
So the first time I knew of who you were, and I apologize, I feel badly that I have not been following you for years because I
It, o-
should have been.
it only takes 40 years to become an overnight success.
Wonderful. So you were on Marie Sutro's Twisted Passages last year with your last book. And I remember being so impressed with that interview and you, but you specifically, that I went to your website, which is jajance.com, and I signed up for your newsletter. And I get your newsletter. And your newsletter is the one newsletter that I read from beginning to end every time because it's like getting a love letter from a relative from back home.
An
And
elderly.
I love that. I mean, I really do feel like you just give us your heart and soul in these newsletters. And I feel like I really personally know you, which is, I think, a lovely thing. You've such a talent for doing that.
Well, it's people tend to think that writers live in solitary confinement in an attic someplace and they don't have any connection to the real world. And I write that blog that publishes every Friday morning because I want to offer my readers a window on my world. And every Friday morning when the blog goes out, it goes up around 6 o'clock in the morning. And then when I stagger out of bed later, I'm a night owl. I watch true crime in the evening after my husband goes to bed. He watches Home and Garden TV and the Food Network. I watch Blood and Guts. But after he goes to bed, I watch true crime. And I'm what always touches me about watching true crime is seeing how the investigators are impacted by the cases they worked on. It's decades in the past, and they still can't talk about arriving at the crime scene or finding the human remains without choking up. And I want to make my readers feel like the investigators are real people. And I want my readers to feel like I'm a real person.
So you do definitely make us do that in both of those instances. So for people who are watching the video, they will see you. They will say, well, this is a lovely looking woman who, as I've just told everyone, writes these really love letters from home on a weekly blog. Now let's talk about J.A. Jance, the author, who doesn't do any of that. She grabs you by the neck and doesn't let you go. So was there a particular inspiration for this book?
The first character in this book who came into my head, and I have to make friends with my characters. I have to get to know them before I can start putting them on my keyboard. I've worn out lots of keyboards over the time. The letters tend to wear off. But the first character who came into my head was Stephen Roper. And we meet him as an 11-year-old boy living with his father, his grandfather, his divorced mother, and his grandfather's second wife. And he despises the grandfather's second wife. So, as an 11-year-old, he murders her. And he gets away with it because he's 11 years old. What 11-year-old kid commits murder? And that sets him on the path of becoming a serial killer. And we watch this. The book was hard to write because Stephen Roper's story starts in 1956 when he's 11 years old. And we watch him growing up, while in the meantime, Joanna Brady's life is moving forward in her direction. So Stephen Roper's story is sort of the wallpaper in a room, and Joanna Brady is in the foreground. And the question is, are those two timelines going to meet up? I've never successfully written a standalone book because you can only put so much into a standalone book, and I want to put in a lot more stuff. I want to know what people like to eat. I want to know who their friends are. I want to know all these bits and pieces about their lives, which is exactly why I write series of books. The Joanna Brady series started with a piece of my history because Joanna Brady was pregnant and unmarried when she was in high school. So the initial scene of Desert Heat, it's Joanna Brady and her mother, Eleanor Lathrop, and her 9-year-old daughter, Jenny. And Jenny has just had a tiny bit of sex ed at school. This is the old kind of sex ed they used to get at school, as opposed to the new kind. So they're waiting. Eleanor is there to take care of Jenny while her parents, Joanna and Andy, go out to celebrate their 10th anniversary. Well, Jenny's sort of smart, and she has counted on her fingers. And yet, there aren't enough months. So she turns to her mom and says, "Mom, was I a preemie?" Well, of course, the wedding was late. She was right on time. But I thought she lobbed a hand grenade into that conversation because Joanna's mother has been on a tear about Joanna being an unwed mother ever since it happened. And so I wrote that scene, and that was the beginning of the book. I don't outline. I'm a seat of the pants writer. I'm astonished that J.K. Rowling outlined the whole series before she ever wrote anything. I could not do that. So I wrote that scene without having any idea that I had just created a thread of storyline that would weave its way through all the books. How did I do that? I have no idea.
Well, so on a little bit of a spiritual note, on a few episodes, I've gone a little spiritual. I do believe that the universe or God, however you see that, gives an artist an idea. And that idea isn't just for one thing. That idea has legs. And I think that so oftentimes what I find is I particularly like series books. Some people prefer standalones. I like both, but I like series because I sort of want to, I want to hang out with Joanna and Butch or Andy before. And I want to be there with them and see how life progresses because that is how we really see life as human beings. Life progresses. My hair may be the same color, but it's only because I magically make it the same color.
Well, my hair is not the same color because I have never magically changed it. But
if you need a tutorial, I can give you one, J.A. I'm good at that.
in that first book, Jenny was 9 years old. Now she's a college graduate. She spent 2 weeks with a law enforcement unit, missing and endangered Indigenous people department. And she's about to graduate from the Arizona Police Academy. And Joanna is on her way to speak at the graduation ceremony. And so I've been able to watch Jenny grew up, but so have all my readers.
Yes, yes, yes.
The same thing happened in a way with J.P. Beaumont. When I started writing about him, his books would only come to me in the first person. I tried for 6 months to get him that first book started, and it wouldn't go. So I was going to Portland on a train to visit a friend. I got on the train with a stack of blue line notebooks and a fistful of pens, and I thought, well, what would happen if I wrote this book through the detective's point of view? So I got out a tablet, I got out a pen, and I wrote, she might have been a cute kid once. That was hard to tell now. She was dead. And as soon as I wrote that scene, I was on the back of Seattle's Magnolia Bluff. I was walking around the crime scene in Beau's shoes. I was seeing what he saw. I was hearing what he heard. I was hearing what he said. And I was also hearing what he is thinking. I'm working on J.P. Beaumont, number 27, by the way.
Holy cow. And this
Yes.
is number 20 for Joanna Brady, right?
It's actually number 21.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. Number 21.
But when I wrote Beau, he had to do something in his life besides work. And I spent 18 years of my life with a man who died of chronic alcoholism at age 42. So they wouldn't let me in the creative writing program at the University of Arizona because I was a girl. But I was smart enough to figure out that you write what you know, and I happen to know a lot about drinking. So I had Beau do the kind of drinking that I had lived with for all those years. So I'm just seeing it as stage business. But the fourth book came out and I was doing signings, and a lady came up to the table and she said, you know, Beau drinks every day. He has a drink of choice. It's starting to interfere with his life. Does J.P. Beaumont have a problem? And I looked at her and I said, you know, these are books. But in the course of those signings, several other people asked me the same question. And I realized that I had patterned that character after a problem drinker. My readers recognized it long before I did. And so that was book number 4. In book number 7, Beau has his first undeniable blackout. Number 8, he's in treatment. I'm working on number 27. So he's been in recovery since book number 8. I have people who tell me they liked him better when he was drunk.
Well, now sometimes people may be funnier,
Worry about them.
but you know, it,
folks. But again, I watched Beau when he started out. He was a divorced homicide cop living in Seattle. He was estranged from his family. He was a cool macho dude. At one point in book number 4, he has a one-night stand, and years later, the progeny of the daughter he never knew he had shows up on his doorstep in Sins of the Fathers.
oh my good heavens to Betsy. But you know that I think that's the beauty of what you do, JA, especially in maybe I might say writing by the seat of your pants, because I think there you have this ability to bring something out of the past, put it into a current book that maybe the readers might have had an inkling about, or but at least they're going to say, oh, I see how that could happen. Because we all know that I heard an author recently say that sometimes in his books he realizes that he writes all these fantastic things. He's like, they don't have to be probable, they just have to be possible. And I really get what he's saying, because unfortunately in some one night stands there is a situation that happens that somebody does appear later on, and I love that.
Well, that book Sins of the Fathers was inspired by our trainer at age 65. We were out of town for a number of months. We were in Arizona. We came back, and our trainer showed up to do our workout with a diaper bag on one shoulder and an infant seat in the other. And his drug-addicted daughter had abandoned her drug-addicted newborn in the hospital.
Oh, my.
Dan, this divorced 65-year-old, went to the hospital and rocked that baby through withdrawal, took her home, raised her by himself for 9 months. And she is now adopted. I have a picture of the real Athena, but that was just too good a story to let go. And that caused me to go back to the one night stand in book number 4 and bring what had just happened in my life into Beau's life.
I
But
love that.
I'd like my characters to feel like real people. They're people who, they have to get the groceries, they have to worry about this, that, and the other, but they do some extraordinary things. But they're regular people. They're not super.
No. So I want to talk. I want to give you a little compliment, a little pat on the back, because I know after all these books, you need at least one more pat on the back. So when this book opens, you give us Stephen Roper's story in a way that is so compelling that I was actually Team Steve for a while. I'm not joking. When Grandma got it, I actually rooted for Steve. And I know that's probably not a nice thing to say. I may spend a few more years in some circle of hell for that. But I will say that as an author, you wrote it so compassionately that I felt for little Steve. However, J.A. Jance, the second murder, oh no. I wanted to drive to Seattle and have a chat with you. I'm like, how could you possibly lead me to feel sympathetic for this guy? But the second murder, and I'm not going to lie about this. I'm not going to give it away, but people have got to read this. It made me feel so guilty that I, for a slender moment, was actually rooting for the guy that ends up being a serial killer.
Poor little kid.
But that's just it. So I have this big thing about don't bother with children. Just don't do it, because they're innocent. Some of them are better than others, but children are impressionable and they're innocent. And if you're an adult like Grandma Lucille, who is a terrible dragon, and you pick on a child like that, I don't care what happens to the dragon. I really don't. And so I think that was the beauty of what you did. But then when he became the dragon, I was like, holy cow. J.A. Jance has just beat me right up and said, oh, Dan, you won't feel for him at all. And here's why.
I think one of the most interesting scenes for me in writing that book is when he goes to visit his father, who is now in prison. And Stephen Roper has always had these voices talking in his head. The voices were there long before he killed Grandma Lucille. But he goes to visit his father in prison, and he thinks, well, I'm a killer, he's a killer. Maybe we're on the same page. And he asks his father, well, do you ever hear voices? And his father says, what the hell, you think I'm a nutcase?
I will say that showed a bit of your humor, because what I loved about that was, while it's not a humorous scene, you saw something that you gave two characters to have a conversation about, because, all of us know that if someone hears voices, with the right defense attorney, you may go to a different kind of lockup facility. More than likely you will, unless you get the dumbest attorney on earth. So that was a sort of a turning point for me in this story, because I was like, oh, I love that. I then rooted for the fact that the father had called him out. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I have to mention, or I have to ask, do you like Girl Scout cookies?
For 3 years, when I was a single mom, my daughter sold 1,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies a year and earned her way to camp. But when I was a little girl in Bisbee, Arizona, selling Girl Scout cookies in the neighborhood, I dragged them around in my radio flyer wagon. That picture was me, little blonde-headed kid.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So it's funny. I used to really like Girl Scout cookies. I'm probably going to burn for this as well. I'm not so fond of them now because they've changed some of the chemicals they use. But
Yeah.
but I am fond of See's candy. So if you put See's candy in a future book, I'll be very happy to eat along with either the criminal or the protagonist, whichever one. I don't care.
I, I, the Bisbee, I, I use real geography in my books, and I do that for a reason. The, the Bisbee that's in the books is not exactly the Bisbee I grew up with because the mines closed and everything changed, but the geography of the place is still the same. And when in this particular book, one of the most challenging things was at the end, the crash and climax, when Joanna is setting a trap and wanting to make sure that Stephen Roper doesn't get out of Dodge. She has to figure out how to use her limited personnel to set up roadblocks in a town where there are essentially 4 ways to get out of town. And so bringing that together was a strategic challenge. But again, I told you I watched true crime at night. So on cold cases, they go in and they interview all the people involved. And then they finally interview the guy who was the main suspect, who usually has done it. And that guy can never remember what he told the cops on the scene, because it's a lot harder to remember lies than it is to remember the truth. So by using real geography here in Seattle or in Arizona, I know the landscape, I know the traffic patterns, I know how long it takes to get from one place to another, I know the weather, so I can report on that in the background while keeping my eye on what the characters are saying in the foreground. And that's why I use real locations instead of pretend locations.
So I will say that I felt like The Girl from Devil's Lake was one of the best and most exciting roller coaster rides I've been on. And I am very fortunate in the fact that I have read a lot and I have interviewed a lot of people. And I say this without any hesitation at all. This was one of the most thought-provoking roller coaster rides I've been on. And I thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you. By the way, I have seen a 12-foot high wall of muddy water come down the San Pedro River. So that is a very real piece of Southern Arizona geography. But I was born in South Dakota, and until I was 4, we lived on a farm. And at some point, I had to be 3 or 4 because we left the farm when I was 4. But it was Saturday morning, and we were going into town. And so my 2 older sisters and I were in the back seat. And of course, there were no seatbelts at the time. And we hadn't made it out to the county road yet. And I let out a blood-curdling scream, and my father jammed on the brakes, and we girls all slid under the front seat. And he turned around and he said, "What in the world is the matter?" And I said, "You forgot my Lammy." Well, the problem is my Lammy was invisible.
Oh my goodness.
No wonder they had forgotten it. But I've been writing fiction since I was in preschool.
You've been looking for and carrying that Lammy with you everywhere you've been. I love that. So again, the book is The Girl from Devil's Lake. It's by J.A. Jance. It is highly recommended. Again, I'm going to share. Your website is jajance.com.
Actually, there's that's where the blog is, but it's my official. They should look from the J.A. Jance official author site.
Fantastic.
We had to leave the jajance.com up so the blog would still work, but there's an official J.A. Jance author website, and that's the one that'll get them to the blog.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
And now I'm going to go make dinner for my husband.
Oh, good. As asking to forgive me for keeping you out too late. Of course, you're a night owl, so you're going to be up for a while.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.